The Joe Rogan Experience.
I want to talk to you about the story of the crystal skulls themselves, because there's this strange sort of folklore attached to them, and then there's a lot of people that believe that it's all horseshit and that these were created by modern people and buried underground in order to...
Well, my understanding of it is, there you go. Yeah, indeed. That's just the citrus model, the crystal driver. There were 13 heads, and it was purported that the Navajo, the Anasazi, the Mayans, the Aztec each had one. The most famous one is the Mitchell-Hedges Skull, which was found in the Yucatan by Anna Mitchell-Hedges. She reached into a cave. She was with her grandfather, and it was around 1926, and she reached in, and there was an oilcloth covered item in there, and she pulled it out and opened it up, and there was the two-piece detachable jaw Mitchell-Hedges skull. Beautiful skull. The Hewlett-Packard engineers did a test on it in the 60s. They said it could not have been carved by a lapidary, by tools. It had to have been polished over hundreds of years, over centuries, to get to the shape that it was. So they said it was a polished item. Let's see. There's the Mitchell-Hedges skull, the Phyllis Newman skull named Max. She says,
wasn't that later decided by some people that this was not the case?
I'm gonna exactly get to that point, because of course it's important. It doesn't affect my business whether they're fake or not. These were beautiful artifacts, and we've recreated it beautifully. But it's nice to know the true story, and I have kind of a thought on the theory either way. So there's the Phyllis Newman skull named Max. She has to put it in the closet because it talks to her. There's one.
Wait. Hit the brakes. I'm going to have to hit the brakes a bunch with you. You're an excellent talker, sir.
Oh, well, I was inoculated with a gramophone needle at birth. I could talk a taxi dispatcher into a vow of silence. I could talk an air raid siren to scrap. But
and you're obviously Canadian because you said slag.
Yeah, there you go.
I used to date a Canadian gal. She loved that term.
Oh, wow. That's another tangent, Canadian gals and Canadian guys. So the Philip Newman skull, she got it. Its name is Max. She has to put it in the closet because it talks to her, she said. So there's the Mitchell-Hedges.
She still has it?
Yes, she does. Phyllis has that one. Then there's the Mitchell-Hedges skull that's in Indiana. The man that took care of Anna at the end of her life eventually had it and got it. It sat in Grafton, Ontario for many years, and I never saw it, but people said when they walked into the room and she uncovered it with the cloth she kept it in, that there was an immediate feeling of well-being and healing coming over to look at the original Mitchell-Hedges skull. There's one in Mexico City. It's one of our minis. It's got a cross stuck right in the top of it, which is, that would shatter a crystal if you did that. How that cross got there, I don't know. There's one at the Smithsonian in Washington, two at the Smithsonian, Washington, D.C., and one at the Victoria and Albert Museum. So there's supposed to be 8 that we have and 5 that we're missing. The woman at the Smithsonian who has the 2 there, I think they're a cloudy orange one and a cloudy green one, and they're smaller. She says they're all fakes, that they were carved by a German lapidary in the 1800s, and that he seeded them around the world. Well, wait a minute. I think one was found in Tibet. One was found in Ohio, we're hearing, at the Serpent Mounds.
Why does she think this one gentleman did it?
Because he was an expert lapidary. He had the tools to do it, and she figures her theory is that they're not artifacts polished by tribal hands and passed down, that they're all fakes. But it's just, wait a minute, he would have to have had an airship to go and deposit these wherever they might be around the world. You can get the pictures of the skulls up, the Smithsonian crystal heads, and the Smithsonian crystal heads you can get in Victoria Albert crystal head.
Do they all have the same similar type of markings?
There's theirs. Yes, they do. They all have the same. Now, you see, some of them are more are clearer. See, there's one at the British Museum. And there's some that are clearer and are more beautiful, and there's some that are rougher, like that one there, and the green and the orange one. But she says all fakes. But if they're all fakes, how did they get to these different places around the world, and how were they found?
Well, here's the thing. But why fake? The word fake is very strange, because it's like they are certainly real carved crystal skulls.
But were they from tribal ancestry? That's the question.
Who made them is the question.
Who made them?
From modern Western
and
people?
And how? Were they polished or were they carved? That's the thing. Aren't they beautiful? Oh, God.
What do the indigenous people say? They say they found them?
The Navajo say they came from the Star Children, that they were brought down and deposited and given to them as crystal ball devices, scrying devices too.
What's that one down there, Jamie? Keep scrolling where you were.
The green is beautiful.
The one on the left right there that looks almost like a real skull.
It is a real skull.
Oh, it is a real skull.
Yeah. No, the green is beautiful. So So I guess, I don't know, I'm not a scientist, I'm not a professional historian. I guess I have to trust the lady at the Smithsonian, but then I question, they were found at different times in history around the world. How do you go and seed? How do you deposit them there?
Why does she believe that? Has she given a coherent reason why she thinks that they're all hoaxes?
I guess she's done her analysis, whatever they've done, to their skulls. But again, the Hewlett-Packard engineers took that Mitchell-Hedges skull and they said this have not have been polished. It would have been cracked or destroyed. It could not have been built by tools. It would have been cracked or destroyed. It had to have been polished. Yeah.
So, but what about some sort of a very fast-moving drill with a diamond bit on it that can slowly grind down?
Well, there'd be marks that would be visible under the scanner.
Couldn't you polish those marks down?
I think that the intensity of the Hewlett-Packard scrutiny revealed that there were none of those marks, and that's why they were able to make their claim.
Here's the problem with this: is like you want them to be real, right? Don't you?
Oh yeah, I love the legend.
I do too. I do too. But I don't trust me.
No, neither do I.
So
that's why I say openly.
When you're saying all these things, I want to believe you. I want them to be from the sky people.
I do too, but again, you've got a professional in Washington at our National Museum there who says no, they're not.
Yeah, but what does she know?
Well, we could.
She might be one of them party poopers.
Get her on the phone.
She might be a party pooper.
I think that she's probably as in love with the skulls, even though they are, not polished in her mind. I bet she loves them as much as we do.
But the thing is, if you are a professional intellectual or someone who's a curator of fine artwork and ancient relics, you kind of have to be one of those people that dismisses anything preposterous. Because if not,
that's right. Like Neil Tyson, don't you love him?
Yes, I love him to death.
I love Neil, but there's no way you can sit down and say Neil, Barney, and Betty Hill were abducted by a flying saucer in 1957. He's not going to accept that because he can't accept that because everything in his training, everything in his knowledge, everything that he knows about physics and science and propulsion in the universe and how to get from place to place defies the legend, or I would say defies the theory that there are extraterrestrial advanced ships out there. He can't accept it. It's just, it would be unprofessional for him to say, okay, there's even a possibility that there were abductions. But
the Betty and Barney Hill story is very interesting, but there's no real evidence other than their testimony. Is that correct?
Well, there was a stain on Betty's dress. There's her excellent recall. He was unconscious.
What was the stain on her dress that's so interesting to you?
It was a fluid that they used in the testing, that some kind of a fluid,
the
a chemical.
Alien testing?
That they did when they drew ova from her and they drew sperm from him. Now, so there's a book out called Contact by Stanton Friedman.
I read that.
Kathleen, I'd love to know where the car is. Where the Chevy they were driving.
Oh, it disappeared?
Where is that? I don't know. I'd have to ask Kathleen where it is. Did it end up in a junkyard? Because there were marks on the back of the car as well. There were trace evidence in the back of the car. Ted Phillips is. He goes around the world collecting trace evidence and radioactive signatures from sightings and landings. On the back of the car, there was a couple of marks, but it was Betty's. It's their credibility. Why would they want to bring this into their lives? And she was conscious, semi-conscious through much of it, and Barney was not conscious. He was unconscious. If you hear the tapes of Ben Simon's interviews with them under hypnosis, the screaming and he was just so frightened. Yeah. And the Zeta Reticuli map, when the being Betty looked at the map and the being showed her a map as she was on her way out the door, and she said, "May I take this?" And the being was going to give it to her, but then another one zipped up and said, "No. You can't have this."
Zeta Reticuli is exactly the same place where Bob Lazar says they found those with the spaceships that they have at Area or S4.
Well, the Little Greys, Zeta Reticuli, Barney and Betty's abduction. You had Marjorie Fish, an amateur astronomer. She took the memory of Betty's. Betty drew up the star map, and she did a three-dimensional scale model of that part of the universe and was able to identify Zeta Reticuli 1 and 2 and accepted by astronomers. So that map that Betty saw aboard that ship had not been seen on Earth before.
And Betty has no history of astronomy or no studying it?
No, none of it at all. And interesting things like when they got back to the house, the house was open and the keys to the house were on the table with leaves so that they might have dropped them at the site and the beings returned them. Now, you know who Bud Hopkins was?
Yes.
he said that since he studied the Linda Cortile case, where the woman was floated out of her apartment building over the East River, and Orange Orb picked her up,
Tell
plunged
people
into
who
the
he
river.
was. He was the guy.
Bud was an artist. He was a graphic artist. He was a designer, a painter, and a lovely man. And he was one of the first people to start to deal with the trauma of abductees. He got a reputation for being able to interview them, hypnotize them, interview them, and get their stories and empathize and sympathize with them. And he said that in some cases that he studied, the beings would grab a man from somewhere in America and grab a woman and out of their cars, out of their clothes, put them up, test them, draw ova, draw sperm, fluids, whatever they were doing. And then the woman would wake up in the man's shoes or a different car, or almost as if after the beings were finished with them, I don't care where they go now. Yeah, put them back, that kind of thing. He said that was the oddest phenomena.
Like releasing a trout.
Yeah, that's right.
If
Well,
you
I think that's
catch a trout, you catch a big rainbow trout and you're fly fishing and you got a barbless hook. Most people, if you go to Montana, go to the Gallatin River, shout out to the Gallatin.
Beautiful.
Gorgeous place. People catch and release because they appreciate that the trout are there. They'd rather go buy halibut from a store and not eat the fish because they want the salmon to be healthy. They want the trout to be healthy.
Well,
so they
love
catch
that.
them. And then they release them. But if you're a brown trout, well, brown trout are invasive. But if you're a rainbow trout, and someone catches you, and they take you on some 200-yard run down this river as they're trying to draw you in. It's a big 9-pound rainbow, catch of a lifetime,
Beautiful
right?
time.
And some guy pulls it on, it takes pictures of it, like shows it, and then releases it. And then this thing's like, how the fuck did I get here? What am I doing outside of my universe?
Yeah.
What am I doing in this other dimension of air where I can't breathe?
Precisely.
Yeah.
And that's catch and release.
Catch and release with people.
Travis Walton says, you got to think of them as just people from over there. They're just
he's
people
the
from
guy
over
the
there.
Fire in the Sky movie was based on. He's
Yeah,
got
yeah.
another interesting story. Here's what I want people
credibility there, and credibility with Barney and Betty. I just don't think they're lying, and I don't think the Ariel school children are lying.
I don't want to think they're lying. This is the problem that I have with it. I want to believe them. But this is what I want people to consider, because most people that are pragmatic, reasonable people that don't want to be ridiculed, they look at these stories and they go, oh, come on, people are full of shit. And I've been there too. But I want people to imagine that if aliens did occasionally visit Earth, how often do you think this would take place? And how it would be very infrequently. And if it was happening, these would be completely unique, unusual occurrences out of nowhere, where someone would come down, they would do something, and they would be leaving the person with this thought and this memory and this inability to describe it with normal words. If you were taken aboard a spaceship and you were some reptilian beings that were 3 feet tall were running experiments on you and you were paralyzed, and then they released you back on Earth, what words do you have available to you to describe this experience in a way that, like, if you tell me, hey, Joe, I went whitewater rafting with my kids. It was a great time. It was so fun. We got to see eagles, and it was gorgeous. And then we had lunch at this beautiful little cafe. What a great day. I can envision this experience. I can see it. But if you tell me, hey, man, we went camping, and I woke up, and some alien had a finger in my ass.
The Allagash incident, they went camping, and they disappeared.
Quite a few of those, right?
There's hundreds of thousands. And here, I brought you a book. This is Bruce Maccabee's book. It's all the headlines from 1952, 432 reports given. And I'll address your specific question about people, how they relate their experiences and how genuine they feel in a second here. 432 reports given the Air Force in 1952 on aerial sightings, ships from other planet. We've got memos from the government here. Former Army pilots sees flying saucer by daylight, whatever was cited here. July 30 stories, fighter pilots at Newcastle say alert for more saucer reports. These are newspaper.
Yeah.
That's yours.
Well, newspapers never lie.
Well,
I don't know if you know that.
Well,
they never make fake stories.
Well,
they never talk shit about people.
The New York Times is pretty reliable. Ralph Blumenthal and Leslie Keene are reporters for the New York Times, and they've been studying this phenomenon. They report very credibly on it. I'll tell you how an abductee's experience is related. I attended a lecture at the Fifth Avenue Medical Institute in Manhattan with my wife a few years ago. That would be about 15 years ago. And John Mack was the lecturer. You know, he wrote the book Abduction. He was the Harvard psychiatrist who wrote Abduction. You can get that up too, Abduction, John Mack.
Yes, I read that as well.
Yeah, and
that freaked a friend of mine out. She was a very pragmatic, non-UFO believing person, and we were working together on news radio, my friend Maura Tierney, and she came up to me and she goes like, this book is freaking me the fuck out. And he wrote a second book as well. Didn't he die in a car accident?
John Mack,
I believe he died in a car accident.
Stepped off a curb in a small town in England, and he was struck by a car.
Yeah.
And 3 other John Macks died the same day in England. So
you think people were whacking John Max because he knew too much?
I don't know.
Let's take
Again,
them all out.
I was at this lecture, and there were 300 abductees there. That some who he'd interviewed with, some he had not, but who were there for interested to find out more about their experience. And one guy got up and said he had one arm, and I don't know whether that was related. I don't think it was related to the experience, but he said, I'm a Wall Street broker. I'm quite well off. I have a sailboat. I was in Long Island Sound a few years ago, and a blue light hit me, and I had missing time of about 5 or 6 hours. But in it, I have filtrated memories of beings addressing me and telling me that I was powerful and influential and I could help the planet survive. And they put me back in my ship, and I woke up, and he said, I'm waiting for them to come back. I want them to come back. And I asked the room, I got up and I said, of all of you who've been taken, how many of you would want to repeat the experience or have it happen again? And about half of them said, no way they'd want it to have it happen again. And half said, yeah, we'd like it to happen
Half.
again. Yeah. Half, yeah.
Now, I love a
So
good
Bruce signed this to me, and I'm going to give it to you. And it's just got great. It's got great headlines from the 50s, which was a massive time for saucers. You know that famous photo of the saucers over the Capitol, the glowing lights, and yeah.
See if you can find that photo, Jamie, because it is quite interesting.
July 1952, Washington.
Do you
sightings.
think this was initiated by the detonation of the atomic bombs at Hiroshima and Nagasaki, where they decided, okay, these fucking monkeys are doing some stupid shit. We need to go down there and see what's up and see if there's imminent danger to the cosmos. Let's find out what kind of capabilities they have. Because if you listen to Lazar, or if you believe the work of Zecharia Sitchin, or any of the people that believe that human beings were engineered, that there's the reason why there's this giant leap between us and the rest of the primates on the planet is because something came down and manipulated our genetics.
Well, the movie Mission to Mars with Tim Robbins, basically it says that. Basically it shows the face on Mars, and that is one of NASA employees' favorite movies. Yeah, there they are. Yeah. 1952 UFO incident. Thank you very much.
Look at that photo. That's a crazy
beautiful
photo.
Come on, let's go here now,
That's crazy.
folks. Yeah, that ain't an airplane. That ain't a helicopter.
No, it's a crazy photograph, and it's from 1952. I mean, the special effects back then were incredibly crude. This was something that was reported by thousands
of people. They scrambled jets from Andrews for it and everything.
As well as the Phoenix Lights.
The Phoenix Lights is fascinating because the Fife Symington, the governor, said he saw them. He made fun of it with an alien
but he
dummy.
talked about that afterwards. Yeah. He was put under pressure to do so.
Yeah.
He's in a movie called, what is it? There's a documentary on Netflix that's available that he's in, that he talks about the pressure that they put on him to make light of that incident. And he talks about his own personal experiences with seeing some sort of triangle-shaped craft that was enormous, the size of several football fields. It was flying overhead, that was completely silent, and how it freaked him out. I think
the triangle and delta crafts are very, very interesting. But the Tinley Park incidents of the 80s, and with Sam Maranto was the investigator there from MUFON. These things would park over the family barbecue for about half an hour, and families in suburbs were looking up at the sky being blotted out by these things parking above them. So. Yeah, I think it comes down to I don't think these beings. Lord Hill Norton said there were 23 different species visiting the planet in 23 different types of ships. I don't think they want a formal relationship with people on Earth. They want an informal, secret relationship. I think they probably have one with elements of black elements of the Air Force and the government. You know who David Sarita is?
I've heard his
name. David Sarita. You should have him on. He's very knowledgeable about this. His theory is that the Roswell event may have been precipitated by the Trinity explosion because there was such an interdimensional disturbance of the atoms being split and that explosion. There was that saucer there that went down in 47 may have been influenced somehow negatively by that explosion. Now Stanton Friedman didn't buy that. I love Stanton. He just passed away there. He was the expert on Roswell.
Yeah, I'm upset that I never got to meet him before he died.
He was so credible,
an interesting
and so
guy who believed in UFOs, but believed most people were lying about them.
Really?
Yeah. Well, he believed that there was a lot of horse shit going on, including Bob Lazar. He thought Bob Lazar was full of shit.
Why would Bob go out there and do that and compromise his life?
Well, let me tell you something. After talking to him for 3 hours and then having dinner with him the night before, I used to believe I had the best bullshit meter in the world, but as I've gotten older, I've gotten more honest. I didn't see anything. He's an incredibly smart guy, and he's not a guy who's like seeking out attention, and he's not profiting from this. And in fact,
just his demeanor and everything. Jeez, he's like an accountant.
He's a legitimate scientist.
Yeah.
And I've talked to him. One of the things that I engaged him with when we had dinner, we talked about science, just science in general, and we talked about all sorts of different things. And he's a scientist. He's a legit scientist. I've talked to a lot of them.
Yeah,
I know what kind of person he is.
And they just hassled him again. They rated his nuclear isotope.
They think he has element 115. That's what they think.
Wouldn't we all love to have that?
Yeah, that's what they think. That's some artist created that thing up there with element 115. And
element 115, indeed. Well, if you get a little sliver of that, that would be pretty exciting. Yeah,
he talked openly about it in the 90s that he had managed to weasel some away from the Area S4. And they think that he still has it.
Yeah.
But there were some experiments that he had done that George Knapp had actually filmed that had showed some really bizarre distortions using this stuff, and then it was able to. I got to remember exactly what it did that they showed, but they did some experiments with like steam or smoke or something like that, where they showed element 115 emitting some sort of
vapor.
Well, no, it was emitting some sort of a field.
Oh,
where you literally couldn't physically touch this stuff.